Servitude Imperpituis. There are many horrific fates which exist within the bleak future. Tortures forced upon even loyal citizens of the Imperium, nonetheless to those who are truly criminals. From failed Astartes serf to convicted felons, the prospect of becoming a servitor, formerly known as Servitude Imperpituis, is a fate far worse than even the most agonizing death. Of those who are destined for the torturous, mentally castrated lobotomy that is the thrallhood of a servitor, many are made so through mechanicus-operated processoriums. Men and women alike are herded into these nightmare facilities which more resemble abattoirs than they do a processing plant. Prodded by electro-lash, the human cattle know full well what awaits them. Subjected to sorting through an unknowable criterion, those rejected at the opening stages of the process are simply discarded into underground industrial minces, trapdoors opening below them to usher them to their fate. The unmistakable stink of rotting human viscera wafts out from the floor when some unfortunate is rejected in this way, though maybe they are the lucky ones. The convicted individual must then endure the fitting of the only garment they will likely wear for the rest of their existence, while simultaneously collared, sockets forced into their flesh. Passing over follicular inhibitors, these painful machines ensure they can never again grow hair anywhere on their body. There is not a single being who could stand resolute against this pain. Screams of anguish filling the processorium. Though the mechanicus are loath to waste resources, some chemical cocktails must be administered to ensure the incarcerated subjects do not enter into a state of shock or suffer heart failure once their body begins undergoing the mass trauma of surgery, and so they are restrained to a stone-cold, easily cleanable metal throne, with each individual catered to by tech priests of the Omnissiah. For those who are destined to have their limbs removed to make way for trade implements or weaponry, bone saws extrude from the throne the unfortunate is strapped to. With extreme precision, the spinning blades remove any unrequired appendages such as hands from the wrist or legs being trimmed down to the neat, bloody stumps. Blood sprays and pumps only for a split second as follow-up implements cauterize the open wound. Few perish at this stage. A far worse fate awaits them still. The unfortunate undergoing this procedure witnesses everything with a detached horror, wounds being exacted upon their body that should elicit feelings of agony feel instead like pressure and pulling with a bare semblance of pain as the previous dosage of pain inhibitors begin to lose their numbing effect. For those tormented souls whose future requires the lifting of heavy loads, tissue and nerves are flayed from the arms, layer by painful layer, the poor unfortunate bearing witness to the inner workings of their limbs as the tech priests present watch on in a detached silence. Discarded lumps of fleshy muscle, strings of tendon and nerve are messily heaped into metal dishes, though no effort is made to shield the victim from such confronting images. The shock of seeing their inner workings simply adding to the overall horror of the preceding worst moments of their life. With these mortal body parts removed, bones are reinforced to ensure future heavy tasks and sustained operating hours do not damage the asset. There is significant cost invested in such cybernetic organisms, so such support must be implemented during the assembly phase to ensure damage prevention during task execution. Artificial muscle bundles are grafted onto these reinforced bones with skins sutured together to cover up the alterations to the natural human form, though even the skin will not remain as it was. Polymer coatings are layered on top of any remaining flesh, the outer shell of this soon-to-be cyborg servant becoming reinforced against the ravages of both time and the hazards of its toils ahead. These alterations, overseen by the sacred priests of Mars, will ensure the specimen is far more productive in a lobotomized state than they were fully cogent. The implements of which will aid, if not define, the servitor's function for the remainder of its unlife are fitted. Electroflails, cannon appendages, unwieldy powerful metal calipers, interface tools, there are an almost endless array of tools a servitor can be fitted with. Before the final lobotomization can occur, an especially gruesome procedure must be executed. Lowering, level with their eyes, whirring, rounded metal implements hinge into view before springing into both eye sockets and cutting the eyeballs free of the optic nerves. Screams of terror and pain intermingle throughout the facility as one of the primary 5 senses is taken away. In place of their natural eyesight, targeting arrays and sensors are finally attached to the optic nerves. Fine metal clamps pulling the nerves taut out of the eye socket so the interface can be attached neatly. Finally, the time has come, that fated moment which all who are assigned to the fate of Servitude Imperpituis dread. The metal throne in which the unfortunate subject is secured to begins to slowly decline backwards as a powered saw begins to rev. The whinging sound of the saw sends fearful shivers up the spine. As they tip backwards, heavy breathing and sobbing for what has been taken from them so far is replaced by the entire body tensing in anticipation of the ultimate defilement of their body and mind. The whirring grows louder as the trepanning saw begins its gruesome work, grinding open the cranium above the ear, spanning the full circumference of the head as blood weeps freely. Mechanical hands gently nurse the lid of the skull before it creaks open, exposing the inner workings of the brain. A cold horror shocks the victim as mental images of their own helpless state, their delicate brain fully exposed, and it is too much to bear. The drugs in their system will not grant the mercy of an unconscious state. No, this is the sacred retribution of servitude, and it must be experienced in all its various stages of horror. Once neural control implants are delicately installed, sacred oils are dripped directly onto the brain before a metal cowl is lowered to replace the cranial lid. The cowl is not simply to cover the butchery upon the flesh, but in fact is wired to the brain to also feed devotional hymnals into the punished one's mind, as well as inhibit standard cortical operation within the servitor, ensuring only programmed thoughts and wishes are prioritized in what is left of the servitor's mental capacity. As power to the cortical implants is switched on, a fogginess begins to subsume the servitor victim. Horror and dread give way to confusion as the memories and then the identity of the detained slowly fade to nothing, any mental defenses dissolving completely to give way to the cold logic of programming, a diverse range of zeros and ones. Imperial void ship, warp refueling. Life is generally short, and it is truly hopeless for the mortal crew of Imperial void ships. The dank recycled air, gruel served up to pass as food, and the scant hours of rest between back-breaking labour make the days slowly grind into weeks and the months into years. An amalgamation of sharp thumping pain and depthless misery. As the memory of the faces of loved ones begins to blur and your hatred for the ratings, sergeants and captains peaks, all that is left for you is the fulfillment of your emperor-given duty, assigned to live out your days in the bowels of mighty Imperial void-faring vessels. There are too many ways to die to worry about them all. The vessel frequently press gangs hundreds of new labourers into service due to the atrocious mortality rates of the indentured population. Malnutrition, fights among crew, summary execution following translation from warp jumps, or most dreaded of all, the refueling of the ship's warp drive. An especially lengthy voyage is about to be embarked upon, and it would be foolhardy to not refuel the warp drive, lest all souls be lost in the current of the warp or stranded in some far-off system, hundreds if not thousands of light years from the destination. The deck which houses the refueling socket is massive and miles in length, though that cannot be fully appreciated due to the massive bundles of cords and wires which stretch from deck to far overhead into the dark expanse of what must end in a roof. A muffled, low hymnal chanting becomes audible in the distance, though as it becomes louder, 4 men led by a tech priest appear in the gloom of the refueling antechamber. They are holding upon their shoulders a coffin-shaped warp fuel rod and are each clearly wired to stimpaks and some other unknowable chemical concoctions, with the purpose of keeping these unfortunates alive long enough to complete the sacred work of refueling the warp drive. Whatever the components of the fuel, it is clearly lethal to mortal men, as the members of the procession are each visibly pained to be within such close proximity to it. Woven garments adorn each, made of a material to protect them long enough from their coffin-shaped charge to fulfill the refueling process. Hard-bitten ratings look on, some with pity in their eyes who cannot help but avert their gaze, the others with what could be cynical mirth, for it is not they who face death this day. As the column proceeds to the refueling socket located at the end of the ante-chamber, steam can be seen rising from the protective clothing of the 4 men. One could imagine the skin beginning to slough off underneath the garments, though whatever substance was being pumped into their veins clearly was fulfilling its purpose, as the men maintained their charge despite the damage it was inflicting upon them. The 5th member of the group, the tech priest, who led the procession, maintained a clear, binaric chant as it led the 4 men to their certain doom. One last act, that of martyrdom for the benefit of all aboard the vessel. As the stalwart group reached the opening in the socket crafted to accept the coffin-shaped fuel casket, the flesh of each man had deteriorated incredibly. As the men hoisted up the fuel, arms extending and cloak hems slipping down to reveal corded muscles bare of flesh, they clearly were using every ounce of remaining strength to stand upright and complete their sacred task. As the fuel was slotted into the opening, the men now free of any burden, each collapsed almost immediately to the ground, quickly deteriorating into little more than lumps of partially cooked flesh, thankfully hidden by their thick cloaks. Several small automatic doors inside the deathly still chamber slid upwards as hooded servitors scuttled to the men's remains, scooping up the fleshy deposits before disappearing again. Many more would die this day, for the ancient vessel needed sustenance before embarking upon its voyage in the Emperor's name. Corpse Starch. Across the Imperium of Man, millions die from starvation or are otherwise on the threshold themselves, only managing to get by on the little food available in their frontier town, hive city or regimental field kitchen. Luckily for the citizenry of the Imperium, the Emperor protects, and through the sacrifice of your fellow citizen in times of scarce food, corpse starch can be used to feed the masses. This reconstituted mix of human-sourced nutrients and minerals should in no way replace a balanced diet, merely to stave off starvation on distant battlefronts or form the core of an otherwise balanced diet offset by your choice of sustainably sourced algae, grox meat, or other biomatter native to your planet of residence. You must realize that the recipe for corpse starch, and indeed even the name, differs from system to system and throughout various cultures. In the densely packed streets of the hive world Necromunda, Corpse Guild representatives make their way from town to town throughout the never-ending maze of habblocks and shanties, collecting the dead for rendering into nutrient paste. Relatives of the deceased leave the remains of their loved ones at their door in piles or within the street so as to avoid any need to interact with the grim collectors of the dead. The purpose of the Corpse Guild on Necromunda is mirrored across countless worlds within the Imperium's domain, for it is as vital as it is gruesome. Without the removal of corpses, disease would run rife, killing many and spreading disease. Upon worlds where thousands, if not millions, die per solar day, this risk is increased 100-fold. Upon agri-worlds covered by continent-sized algae farms, this aquatic plant is grown by the gigaton to ensure sufficient product is available to feed systems worth of populace. Not only this, but this algae is used to cut with the protein aspects of corpse starch to create a healthy, nutrient-rich diet for the Imperium's finest child soldiers. It is known that within the grimdark future, all must do their part to ensure the survival of the human species. In saying this, there is a brutal aspect of Space Marine recruitment which can oftentimes be overlooked in favour of the more obviously gruesome or disturbing practices within the setting. Considering this is a video about disturbing practices, this fact certainly has earned a place. We've discussed previously this topic as it pertains to the Death Spectre Space Marine chapter within our cruelest, most savage Space Marine video. You can find linked on the screen or in the description below. But many chapters differ from each other when it pertains to their recruitment methods. One fact which is fairly uniform across all is the age of the human aspirant when they first are accepted as such. From the age of only 10 years old, the equivalent in my country of a child in years 4 or 5 at school, the aspirant undergoes surgery for the first 3 phases of their Astartes organ implantations. These are the secondary heart, the os medulla, and the biscopia. All 3 are generally completed throughout the course of the child's first year, but can be completed at once if need be, though whether this comes at added risk to the aspirant's health is not stated, though logically you'd think it would due to the risks of surgery anybody is subject to. 15 organ implantations steadily occur up to the age of 14 to 16 years old, with the mucranoid, Betcher's gland, progenoid glands and black carapace each occurring after phase 15 up to the age of 18 years old. Of course, prior to a willing applicant being classed as an aspirant, the child must inevitably pass some sort of trial which the chapter has created to test the applicant's martial skill together with the keenness of their mind. Again, casualty rates can differ from chapter to chapter, but can occur at such an astonishing rate that at times all children who take place perish before passing the trial. If you've learned something new in one of our videos, please consider subscribing and liking the video. It helps us immensely. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the content. Until next week, take it easy. Have a good one.